Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pastor Safa. At this time, we will commence with our rebuttals. The rebuttals are 15-minute time limit. And Dr. Badawi, you're up first.
Assalamu alaikum again, and if we can get this on the screen, because this is exactly what I didn't have time to cover. One of the issues that Brother Safa raised are the alleged instruction in the Quran to fight the people of the book until they give jizya and feeling themselves humiliated. Response number one. Let me just get. Okay. First, I mentioned to you earlier outright that there are terms in Arabic and in the Quran that sound general, but there is evidence that it applies only to a subset, not all. So all these quotations are not to be generalized, that Brother Safa said. First of all, historically speaking, the enmity that was shown to Muslims was not only from idolatrous Arabs, it was shown as well by some other people from what you call people of the book, some of whom, like some of the Jewish tribes in Medina, betrayed the peace treaty with the Prophet and actually stabbed Muslims in the back at the time of the Battle of the Trench and made coalition contrary to their commitment with the enemies. Among Christians, many people were decent, and I'll speak about them. But there were those Christians, for example, among the Byzantines, who gathered a huge army to invade Arabia and destroy Islam because it calls for egalitarian, and they were big emperors. And that is the Battle of Tabut. I don't know how could we neglect and leave aside all of those historical contexts among those particular people who called themselves Christian, violated Christianity, and wanted to commit violence against Muslims. It is not to be generalized. Secondly, whatever you say about hadith, I said it earlier, the Quran comes first. I'm not saying hadith is not relevant. Quran comes first, it's the most accurate. Hadith must be understood in the light of the Quran. I did quote the verse earlier in chapter 60 that says, if people are not fighting you because of your religion, driving out of your home, you treat them kindness and justice. And invasions and killing is not justice, is not kindness, and as such, it applies only to those who violated that and betrayed Muslims or committed violence against them. Aggression has to be stopped. Now, if indeed this was a general instruction to fight Jews and Christians, then that raises some logical questions. I said earlier, Islam, and this is the Medina revelation. In the later revelation, it says a Muslim can get married to a Jewish woman or a Christian woman. If indeed they have to fight, I'm not talking about family fights, real fights with blood, how does the Quran allow even marriage, which is a more intimate type of relationship? Historically speaking, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did not fight his neighbor, because one verse he did not even quote. I had it, I'm up front. That fight those who grid you about of the unbelievers. Because they're unbelievers? No. Because they were constituting threat to the Muslim community, including the big emperors of the Persian and Byzantine Empire, and Muslims have to defend their borders. They didn't have any united nation, you have to defend yourself by yourself. Thirdly, he says that those who are not accepting Islam have to pay jizya. And he had a very strange interpretation I never heard of jizya, jaza. In fact, it is jaza, but not jaza, or in return for not accepting Islam. In return, jizya means in return for receiving the services of the state. Because under Islamic State, truly Islamic State, I'm not talking about the 51 nation, he's talking about they're deviating from Islam. I'm talking about normatively in the teaching of Islam, all citizens, Muslims and otherwise, are entitled to all the services, and they are exempt from being, drafted in the army so that they don't fight against their own particular beliefs. Now, how do you finance the state if all the funds are coming only from zakah paid by Muslims? Why didn't the Quran say, but take zakah from Christians also so that you be equal? Well, if you tell Christians to pay zakah, which is not only a tax, it is a religious concept, it is part of the pillars of Islam, you're insulting the religious feeling. Actually, he didn't mention to us something very important, that at the time of Umar, the second caliph after the Prophet, there were some people who did not accept Islam in Arabia and didn't like the term jizya. He said, all right, pay it as charity, just like Muslims pay zakah to contribute their share. Number two, when the question of zakah, it is not a punishment at all, because if a person becomes a Muslim, he pays zakah, which is normally more than what he pays for jizya. Actually, if you calculate zakah, it's actually more than jizya. Jizya is not set in the Quran, it's only a token. Number two, he says that they pay it and while they are humiliated. This is one interpretation that he gave. There are many great scholars like Imam Shafi'i and others say an yadin in Arabic means if they are able, and that's known in Islamic law, that non-Muslim citizens who are living under the protection of Islam are not required actually to pay that poll tax if they're not able to. And they say feeling themselves humiliated. Imam Shafi'i said no. Saghirun has variety of meanings. But like I said earlier, the meaning must be contextual. If a person is not fighting, how come you force him to be humiliated when the Quran says treat him in kindness and justice? This again, what I call the cut and paste approach. And yet he says Saghirun means accepting the authority of the state, because those who fought Muslims before and then finally they were defeated, they're giving that as a token also, not only for receiving the services of the state, but as a token for peaceful relationship, which is far less than what zakah pays. Now, Mr. Safa says that mushrikun apply to Christians. I'm willing to pay $1 million if he shows me a single verse in the Quran if Jews or Christians were called with the epithet mushrikun. $1 million, one place. Not to say that they committed shirk, because shirk has variety of meaning in the Quran, one of which no verse in the Quran ever described Jews and Christians as mushrikun, as he said, idol worshippers. Not one. Listen. Secondly, in Surah Al-Bayyinah, the 80th surah in the Quran, it made a clear distinction between Jews and Christians and idolaters. The word kafaru, and I explained the word kufr again. It says the people who rejected Islam from among the people of the book and the idolatrous, mushrikeen. The word mushrikeen was made as a distinct group for those who rejected Islam. Now, but he says, but that's kufr and infidelity. The term infidelity does not have the equivalent in the Quran when it speaks about Jews and Christians. And you have $1 million there too. First of all, lots of millions are available. First of all, okay, the word infidel in the English language means someone who does not have a religion or someone who does not believe in God. Go to chapter 29, verse 46 of the Quran, and it says that Jews and Christians and Muslims worship the same God. Ilahuna wa ilahukum wahid. Here the Quran says they are believers in God. But the word kufr, again, Mr. Safa gave only one meaning. You need some more depth of understanding of the variety of things. I mentioned that earlier, about the usage of the language. Kufr has variety of meaning in the Quran. One is positive kufr. Positive kufr, that is rejection, to reject something. And it could be positive kufr, and there are verses in the Quran that says there is good kufr. It says anyone who commit kufr or reject Satan and believe in God, he is holding the tightrope of God. So there is positive kufr. It has variety of meaning. It has a neutral meaning. In the Quran, it describes the farmers who put the seed in the ground, that they are committing kufr. You know why? Because etymologically, the origin of the term kufr is to cover up. So that's a neutral meaning. A farmer covering up the seed in the ground. But even in the negative sense, it's used in a variety of ways. And many of the verses that you quoted about Christian, in fact, would fall in that category. Being ungrateful. You could be a believer, but ungrateful. It describes Muslims who have the resources and don't go for Hajj as kafirs. وَمَنْ كَفَرَ. But it doesn't mean they're not Muslims. Ungrateful to Allah. In other words, those who worship other than Allah, even though they believe in God in some way or the other, but they're not grateful to God who created everything, including all of his prophets. That is a theological statement of truth that we find parallel also in the scriptures and that. So it means that. But even if you use it in a more negative sense, there is variety of meaning. It could refer to someone who rejects God altogether, like the people of Noah and Abraham, after evidence has been presented to them. It could also apply to those who believe in God but reject a particular prophet, like Jews rejecting Jesus, for example, or Jews and Christians rejecting Muhammad. But the Quran, after all, says it is not because of your wishful thinking or that of the people of the book. Anyone who does wrong will be punished accordingly. So the question of judging people, I said that outright. I said, yes, there are things in the Quran that say what is right and what is wrong in belief and others. But it's not up to us to mistreat people or hate them. The Quran uses the term oftentimes about the brotherhood, even though people might not agree with you. The other thing that he referred to in hadith, and this is only one example to show the kind of lack